Hi, so here are rebellions under Henry VII. So first of all, the Lovell Rebellion of 1486. There was Francis Lovell, a childhood friend of Richard, and later on Lord Chamberlain, and the Stafford brothers, Thomas and Humphrey, who were Yorkists, and fought under Richard, the Battle of Oswald. So when the battle ended and Richard lost, obviously, they fled to an abbey in Essex to seek sanctuary, so they couldn't be touched by Henry, they couldn't be prosecuted. But after the battle, Henry was kind of smart because he decided to set up a ring of spies to monitor Yorkist supporters, including the Lovell and the Staffords. And in 1486, in April, so about a few months after the battle, Henry wanted to tour northern England. So if you know the map of England, north is Yorkshire, so a stronghold of Yorkist support. Lovell and the Staffords decided to emerge and try to find support, with Lovell even going to actually Yorkshire and finding support there. He did find some, not too much, but I mean, a bit. So Henry heard of the rebellion through his ring of spies and headed north with an army to try and find it. He was already going on a tour of the north, but he decided to go further north to Yorkshire. Jasper Tudor, which was Henry's uncle, he promised the people of Yorkshire that if they didn't do anything, if they didn't start a rebellion, they would all be pardoned. Nothing happened, so they couldn't be punished. But Lovell would. So they could not do anything, and Lovell would be punished, no one else. They could start a rebellion, probably get crushed, and everyone would be punished. So they turned on him. The rebels quickly disbanded, and Henry managed to find two reliable nobles and sent them to arrest Lovell. Lovell managed to flee and went to Margaret of Burgundy, which was Richard's sister, and also this one who just shows up time and time again when talking about rebellions under Henry. Like, she made her life go. I'm gonna try to screw over Henry as much as I can. I'm gonna try to dethrone him, and I'm gonna mention her quite a lot today. So Lovell managed to flee to Burgundy. No one heard from him again. Probably he did. He returned and he fought at the Battle of Stoke with Simnel. I'm going to talk about him later on. But he did return, and after that, no one heard from him again. So he fled, returned out of Battle of Stoke, and was never heard from him again. The Stafford brothers, however, they fled to Worcester and gained a bit of support. Not many, but I mean, just a bit. And fled to another abbey, this time Colham Abbey, and asked for sanctuary. That worked for them before, but wouldn't work for them again. However, Henry already knew they were active, rebellious people, so he sent a couple of spies to try and find them. They did, and he had them removed from the sanctuary, from the abbey, and put on trial. The older brother was executed. They were both found guilty of treason. The older one, Humphrey, he was executed. Thomas was made to promise he'd be good and behave. So yeah, that was quickly crushed. Nothing happened. Other nobles who were suspected of supporting this, like Sir Conyers, they were stripped of stewardship. This guy was stripped of his stewardship in Middleham, had to pay the bond of £2,000, which that's another topic that bonds and recognizes, but I'm not going to get into that today. And then the Abbot of Abingdon, who was the abbot who ran the Colham Abbey, he was fined a 3,000 bond of allegiance for trying to protect the Stafford brothers. So that's the Lovell Rebellion of 1486. Keep in mind that that's a few months after he came to the throne. And yeah, so next up is the Cornish Rebellion. No, the Yorkshire Rebellion. The Yorkshire Rebellion of 1489. So in 1489, Henry made plans to assist Brittany in the efforts to become independent. So Brittany was in a sort of territory in France where Henry had actually sought asylum during the Wars of the Roses. He went down to Brittany and stayed there for 14 years until he was 28, and for the Battle of Bosworth. So yeah, he had sort of loyalties to that region, and when they wanted to become independent from France, he made plans to assist them. But of course, he needed to make sure this won, because if England was successful, they would have a foothold in France. It would become English territory, and they would be there, and the British army, the English army, not British, could go there, and in case of rebellion, in case of invasion or war with France, they would have a place there. So Parliament gave Henry £100,000 to support Brittany. And how do you raise £100,000 if you're a Tudor monarch? Well, you raise taxes. Well, you don't want your taxes to be raised. It sucks when it does happen. So the people were resentful. They were like, no, I don't want to pay tax. So why should I pay taxes? This doesn't involve me. I don't live in Brittany. I don't care about Brittany. Why should I pay for this? So they did raise a bit, 27,000, which, 27% of what they wanted. But it was, it caused a lot of resentment, and it was seen as a form of income tax. Especially the region that hated the most was Yorkshire. If you think about it, it was a Lancashire monarch in the Wars of the Roses, Lancaster House versus Yorkist House. It was a Lancaster monarch who had overthrown a Yorkist monarch, and then he had the nerve to go and ask them for tax for a region he was there in exile, and they didn't really care about. So they had also been hit by a poor harvest, and the tax was too much. So they were like, no, we're not gonna pay it. Thing is, other northern countries were exempted from the tax, so they were supposed to use the finances to help against the Scots. But Yorkshire is York is in the north. Why should they have to pay tax? They had to reserve their income for the Scots, but also pay this tax? No, they're not going to do that. So Henry Percy, he was the Earl of Northumberland, territory in the north. He told the king of what the people thought, and Henry, understandably, this was 1489, so 4 years after Henry came to the throne, he said, I can't really make exceptions, and I can't really be weak, because if I am weak, they're going to see me as a pushover monarch who, the very sign of a rebellion, I'm going to be like, oh no, I'm sorry. Well, he couldn't do that exactly. So he had to push forward, and he also believed that in the future, maybe not in his reign, but in his children's reign, it would become useful if, like I said before, if there was a war with France, Brittany would be there, they could have the English army there, so he had to do it. And he didn't listen to the Earl of Northumberland. The Earl was, he turned north and went to the people and said, hey, so, yeah, I spoke to the king and I told him about our problems and he said no. So the people murdered him. They were really mad. They just took out on the Earl, which they killed the messenger. The guy didn't really, he tried to bargain for it. Didn't get anything. They killed him for it. Poor guy. The thing is, the Earl, he did try to bargain. He did support the tax too, and he tried to maintain a good relationship with the king. So that was maybe why they killed him. I don't know. It just seems like a bit of an overreaction. So the actual rebellion, Sir John Egremont, supporter of Richard, he led the Yorkist rebels, but the Earl of Surrey easily put down the rising, and Egremont, he fled to Flanders. So yeah, my dog. So sorry about that. Henry, he traveled to the north and basically issued pardons to everyone involved in the uprising. So, like, okay, you're trying to rebel against me. It's really fine, but don't do it again. If you promise not to do it again, I'll pardon you, and we can forget about this. And he also installed a new Earl of Northumberland, which was a minor. So under Warship, I think it was, he could control the Earl. So that was another improvement. And the Earl of Surrey, who had helped crush the rebellion, he was made lieutenant in the Earl of Northumberland area. Henry now, I don't think he ever faced opposition from taxes in the north, so that was good. But he didn't ask more money from them for the Brittany cause, because he thought, if I ask for money, they're gonna kill me. So he didn't ask for anything else. Okay then. So that was Yorkshire, 1489. Now we're going to look at the Cornish Rebellion of 1497. So 1497, Henry tried to go to war with Scotland because of the Scottish support for Burke and Warbeck. I'm going to get into Burke and Warbeck in a bit, but you just need to know that he tried to raise taxes to fund the war. Now, if you think about it, Scotland is up north. Cornwall was down south. I mean, why should they have to pay for something that's happening up there? It makes no sense, right? It was also collected really aggressively with corruption and maladministration. Like, at least you're gonna collect the tax. Do it correctly, because people, they don't like the tax anyway. The least you can do is try to make it easy for them. So Cornwall, they were also independent, so they didn't want to tax. They were very far away, and they just didn't want to. And it's understandable. They were so far away, they didn't care, and so they were like, no, you're not going to tax me. You can tax the rest of England, but not me. And there was a rule that only people with 20 shillings a year or more should pay the tax, which was not implemented in Cornwall. So in the case of both rebellions, the Yorkshire and the Cornish one, Yorkshire, the Yorkish people had to pay the tax even though Northern Territories didn't, and the Cornish people had to pay the tax even though there was a rule in the rest of England that people who earned less than 20 shillings a year didn't have to. So, like, what's up with that? And so the rebels were led by Thomas Flammock and Michael Joseph, and they managed to gain 6,000 rebels to support them. Their plan was not to overthrow the king. That wasn't the plan for the Yorkshire Rebellion either. They just wanted to complain and be, hey, we don't think it's fair. You have to pay your tax. So just don't make us pay. That was their only goal. They weren't really dangerous. Like, they lacked menace. They didn't intimidate many people. They didn't enter Exeter. They didn't even enter Exeter. They only gained a few supporters in Somerset. And then after all that, Warbeck abandoned. Lord Audley joined, but Warbeck just abandoned the cause. By June, they did have 15,000 people, and they did manage to get near London. It was a Blackheath, but not much. I mean, Lord Audley, like I said before, he had financial issues and he didn't like the king, so that's why he rebelled. But they were easily outnumbered by the royal forces. They were ill-armed, and 200 were killed. The leaders were captured and executed. But they did manage to reach the outskirts of London. They were 15,000, but it wasn't that bad. They just wanted to complain about the tax. I mean, compared to the Warbeck and Simnel one, and the Lovell one, but they really want to overthrow the king. There was a kind of second rebellion in which Warbeck re-landed in Cornwall in September of 1497, and the rebels were so close to taking Exeter. They were really close, but they still had royal forces because, you know, they wanted to protect their country, and they fled. Warbeck, he confessed. Then I'm going to get into that, but he eventually got executed. So I'm going to sum up the three rebellions. Three. So Lovell, 1486. The Stafford brothers, they could have escaped and gone to sanctuary again. If it hadn't been crushed that quickly, it could have been more serious, and Lovell escaped. It was kind of a serious threat. It wasn't that serious because there was no violence. The Pope actually backs Henry, so that's a big thing. Henry uses effective tactics. The Jasper's pardoning of the rebels, that worked. The spies were found, and the government managed to stop the rebellion. So think about it. The Lovell one wasn't really a threat; it was just an annoyance. But I mean, it was right at the beginning of the reign, so not really. Sorry about my dog. Anyway, Yorkshire, 1489. It was kind of a serious threat because Richard, they were sympathizers. The people were really angry. They murdered the poor Earl of Northumberland, which I don't understand why they did it. And the poor guy did nothing. He was the messenger. They had Yorkist links. I know it was in Yorkshire, you know. And Egremont, one of the leaders, he managed to escape. But again, it wasn't that much of a threat overall because it was crushed really easily by the Earl of Surrey. Henry's conciliatory gesture of, we're not gonna hurt you, we're just gonna pardon you, don't do it again. The new Lieutenant of Northumberland was Lovell. The Earl of Northumberland was young, so no future problems were caused. The Cornish Rebellion of 1497 did trigger a second rebellion. It got sent to it got to the outskirts of London. They were right at Blackheath. So you think about it, it makes sense. And it wasn't the kind of threat because they were from Cornwall to London. And all this territory in between, they could have been stopped, but no one did. And there was a lot of resentment. But again, it wasn't that much of a threat. They were ill-armed. Henry may have done the thing of letting them come close to London on purpose. So, I mean, think about it. He could let them close to London, so his army wouldn't be concentrated there. They would not be tired from traveling, and they could be trapped there, like the rebels. So Henry would win. So think about it. And the rebels flee, cause a rebellion. So the threat was relatively serious, but not that much. They weren't trying to kill the king. They were just trying to get the taxes removed. Now comes the pretenders. So there's a difference, people always get this wrong, of pretenders and imposters. So if you're a pretender, you have a claim to the throne. For example, Henry, at the Battle of Bosworth, he was a pretender. You're an imposter, you're trying to pretend you're someone who can get to the throne. If you're an imposter, you don't have a throne. If you're a pretender, you do. So there were three main ones. There were like two super main ones, then another one. So the first one is Simnel, 1487. So just after the Lovell and Stafford one. He was born in Oxford, and his teacher, Father Simmons, he told him, you are going to be the Duke of York. You're not the Duke of York. And Simnel was like, fine, and became the center of Yorkist support because the Duke of York was one of the princes in the Tower. And in May of that same year, the Earl of Kildare in Ireland, he crowned Simnel as the king, Edward VI. Like, he didn't even invading them. They're already crowning him as king. So he did get to Ireland in a company of soldiers, which was a signal to invade England. But before this happened, Simmons thought, hey, you know what? Now forget about the Duke of York. You're going to be the Earl of Warwick. Yeah, the Earl of Warwick was in custody. Henry had him. So I genuinely think if they had stuck to the story of the Duke of York, that would have been more successful, because the Earl of Warwick was under custody. The king had him. He later paraded him around. But if you're gonna pretend to be someone you're not, just make sure it's someone they can't just show. Margaret of Burgundy, remember her? She gave a Simnel 2,000 soldiers. So, I mean, he had support. You can't lie about that. John Lovell, the Earl of Lincoln, he fled to join the rebels, and Lovell 100% knew he was an imposter. He knew perfectly well that was not the Earl of Warwick, so he was there for his own political gain. He wanted more power, so he said, "Oh, this guy has a chance. He may overthrow the king. The king's not been there for not even close to 2 years. Yeah, I'm gonna try and overthrow him." So in June of 1487, the month after he was crowned King of England, again, I don't understand why, Simnel fought the royal forces at the Battle of Stoke. So there were 12,000 royal forces and 8,000 rebels. They landed in Lancashire, which, again, I get the logic, you try to find support in the land where you expect to find the least support for your cause, so it would appear to weaken the strength of the king. But, if you're going to start somewhere, start in Yorkshire, which is going to have more support to the Yorkist cause, than if you start in Lancashire, because Henry was Lancaster. At least if you're going to try to be smart about it, first of all, he wanted to be the Earl of Warwick, who's under the custody of the king. Second of all, he lands in Lancashire and not in Yorkshire. I don't get. But there was little support, obviously, and they lost the battle. The plot was really stupid. Henry literally got the Earl of Warwick and paraded him around London, like, hey, look at this, the Earl of Warwick. That guy who's pretending to be the Earl of Warwick? Well, that's not him. This is him. And Simmons was arrested, but managed to escape because he was a priest. He was protected by the church. John Paul was killed. Other Yorkist leaders were killed. Not only in the battle, but was executed for treason. And Henry was like, fine, I'm going to let Simnel live. He was under the influence of Father Simmons, so you can work in my kitchen. He spent the rest of his life working in the kitchen. And the real enemy to Henry was Margaret of Burgundy and the Earl of Kildare. The Earl of Kildare wasn't killed. And Margaret, she was far away, but she did constantly keep trying to send more troops and money to find rebels. Get a life. Yes, Henry killed her brother, but I get it. Just calm down. The next one is Brooklyn Warbeck. So, Simnel was only in 87. Warbeck was from 95 to 97. He did appear previously in 1491 in Ireland. He was 17, employed as a servant. But he said, hey, I'm Richard of York. I'm the Duke of York. Yes, that makes sense. He was one of the princes in the tower. Was not like Simnel. At least Warbeck was smart about it. Then he did admit he was John Osbeck, of Burgundian origins, which was instigated by, guess who? Margaret of Burgundy. And he had another appearance in Ireland, the Earl of Kildare, with the Earl of Kildare. I don't really understand that. It's just fucking Warbeck, you know. Then Charles VIII, he welcomed Warbeck to French court. So Simnel had the support of the Irish. Warbeck had the support of the Irish and the French. He got invited to court. First to distract Henry from Brittany, because remember, this was all at the same time the Cornish Rebellion, the Yorkshire Rebellion was happening. That was earlier. But still, the whole Brittany thing was still happening, so the king wanted to distract Henry and also be like, hey, we got your guy. What are you gonna do about it? So in 1492, Charles and Henry agreed on returning Warbeck. Warbeck's like, no, I'm gonna go to Burgundy where they actually want me. No, not because of that. He just knew he would find support from Margaret of Burgundy and Emperor Maximilian from the Holy Roman Empire. So Henry manages to, Warbeck did have support in England, but Henry squashes that pretty easily. Not really important here. And yeah, he did find support for the Warbeck cause in England, like William Stanley, who, if you remember correctly, he supported Henry at the Battle of Bosworth. So, turn on him. He got executed for treason. From what I know, and if I'm not correct, I'm sorry, but William Stanley, he didn't outright support Warbeck. He simply said, hey, if Warbeck is who he says he is, I'm going to support him because he's the legitimate king. He should be on the throne. And Henry's like, no, over his head. So yeah, that happened. So in July of 1495, Warbeck lands in Kent, in the south of England, and he had no support because Henry had managed to crush all English support and went to Scotland because he knew that Scotland were not fans of Henry. And he managed to befriend James IV, who gave him an income of £1,200 a year. So this guy comes in, he's like, hey, I'm the future king of England. I'm the rightful king of England, but I'm going to be the future king of England. They're like, oh, right, I'm sorry. Well, here you have money, and then you can marry my cousin. That falls apart, eventually. But in 1497, so 2 years later, James, well, he was still supporting Warbeck. He tried to invade England on Warbeck's behalf. So it was like to the north, he went there. This was happening at the same time of the Cornish Rebellion. So keep that in mind. And that was a whole tax thing that happened there. It was because of this. Warbeck was horrified by the behavior of the troops. Like, if you're gonna be king of England, you can't be horrified by these things. And also, that's what war is like. Don't be horrified by it. If you're a king, you're gonna experience quite a lot of this. And he's like, I'm not gonna go south. Yeah, I can stay in Scotland. You guys can go down there. Just leave me alone. I want to be king of England. That's all I know. You do the dirty work. I'm too good for it. So Henry offers James the Treaty of Ayton, which closes Scotland up to pretenders. And Warbeck's like, oh no, where do I go? So he went to Ireland, where he knew he had support more than anyone. He knew the Earl of Kildare disliked Henry. So he's there for a few months. He's there for a month. And he's running out of support. He's tired. He's been doing this for 2 years. Like, hey, I'm not Richard of York. I'm fucking Warbeck. And Henry's like, okay, fine. It's fine. Nothing happened. You can go to my court. I'm gonna keep an eye on you. Just don't do anything. Just stay there. So in 1498, he tried to escape. And Henry's like, yeah, I don't like that. So you're gonna go to Tower of London. Again, nothing's gonna happen. He's gonna stay there, behave, and who knows, maybe I'll let you go back to court. Yeah, he was accused of plotting with the Earl of Warbeck in 1499 and executed. Both of them. So the actual Earl of Warbeck was killed, and now Margaret Warbeck was killed. There's a theory that says that Henry just used the Earl of Warwick as an excuse to Henry used Margaret Warbeck as an excuse to kill the Earl of Warwick. And who knows? Then the last one is Edmund de la Pole. If you remember correctly, John de la Pole supported Simnel, and he was executed for treason. He was punished for his brother's behavior and had to pay £5,000 to inherit his father's land. And he was not even allowed to inherit the title of Duke. Which I get. I mean, Henry, you want to punish the family. But I also get Edmund's point of view. He didn't take part in the rebellion. Why should he be punished? The guy who did take part in the rebellion, he was killed. So the Earl of Suffolk, he had a grudge due to Duke being above Earl, and like precedence is important because I don't know, the nobility is like, oh, I don't want to be I want to be a Duke. I want to be no, just stick with what you have. That's fine. So he killed someone for. I mean, the Earl of Suffolk is Edmund de la Pole. He killed someone who had to appear in court. So they summoned him to an ordinary court away from the peers in fear that he was going to kill anyone else. He's like, oh no, I'm so embarrassed. I'm going to go to Burgundy. And who lives in Burgundy? Margaret of Burgundy and Maximilian. And he goes there in July 1499. Henry's like, hey, come back. I'm not going to do anything to you. You haven't really done anything. And you killed the guy, but it's fine. Come back. And he's like, okay, fine, I'll come back. Don't worry about it. I'm going to stay here. Nope. He goes back to Burgundy in 1501. And he flees with his brother, Richard de la Pole. They seek help from Emperor Maximilian and calls himself the White Rose, the head of the Yorkist house. I mean, sure, if we want to. And Henry, this is really funny. Henry says to Maximilian, hey, I want this guy back. I want Suffolk back. Here's £250. Consider this a payment, and you can return the whole. And Maximilian's like, oh, thank you so much for the